Well, I have some breaking news for you. Well, me and Brianna Lyman have some breaking news for you, and you are going to be blown away by this, but Joe Biden is not a functional adult. I know. I woke up this morning and I picked up the Wall Street Journal and I read that and I was stunned. He seemed so sharp, so full of vigor, but apparently now everyone's willing to come out and talk about it, and he's not been functional, something we all knew for the last 4 years, which begs the question, who exactly is commander-in-chief right now? Joining me now, Brianna Lyman, elections correspondent with the Federalist. Okay, well, that's not good. It's not exactly news to anybody, but who is running the country?
Well, it's not Joe Biden, and it's also not Kamala Harris. And I think that this report really underscores why Kamala was so disqualified from running and being our president. Because when you see that your president, as vice president, is this mentally incapacitated and suffering from some kind of illness or disability, or maybe it's just severe old age problems, she sat back for 4 years while this country has descended into turmoil, rather than getting the cabinet together and saying maybe it's time we either invoke the 25th or convince him to step down. That is a woman who has no spine, no backbone, and has no spot in the White House ever.
Yeah, and by the grace of God, I don't think she's ever going to get there. Okay, so you are probably a lot more tuned into the swampiness of D.C. than I am. If you had to guess, did nobody say anything because they just didn't want to upset the apple cart? Or did nobody say anything because they like being able to just have a bunch of filthy communist staffers run the country while that old cadaver goes out there on camera and takes all the slings and arrows?
Yeah, they like being able to pull the strings. You know, the same way that nobody believes Mike Johnson wrote the CRs, the same way nobody believes Joe Biden has been making all of these decisions. And that obviously begs the question of who's writing the CR and who's writing Biden's executive orders, who's making these decisions for our country, which it looks like we're not going to get the answer to. I do hope that a Trump administration or a Republican Congress, if they can find some spine and backbone, will hold hearings about this massive cover-up, because it's not just some small cover-up, right? This is the leader of the free world, so to speak. And this is just as bad as what Edith Wilson and Woodrow Wilson did back in, 1919, when he was basically not running the country, but his wife was. You know, both deserve recognition, and Biden deserves to be, or the people around him deserve to be held accountable for what they've done to this country.
I think his wife deserves maybe the most hatred, certainly not the most responsibility when it comes to the country, but look, you and I can sit and argue why a chief of staff would want to keep Joe Biden there, why this comms guy, this girl wants to go work at MSNBC. But his wife saw the worst of him, the Joe Biden you and I will never see. She saw him in the morning. God only knows how he was functioning at night, if he really has dementia. If anyone has any experience with that, you know how they do at night. She saw the worst of him, and she was completely pushing this man to run again. What kind of a soulless witch did Joe Biden marry?
Yeah, that actually is really sad, because when someone reaches a stage that Joe Biden has clearly reached, where he's not able to make big decisions on his own because he's either sleeping, he's not really aware of what's going on, he should be able, like any person, to depend on their spouse to help guide them through this part of their life. And Jill Biden instead decided to maintain the reins of power. It's why she's the one who's constantly seen at these events, traveling, what have you. And people are supposed to not question it. And another big problem with this story is that the propaganda press, right, the corporate left-wing media, they have spent years calling people like you and I conspiracy theorists for suggesting that Joe Biden wasn't all there. But now that the election's over, here and there they can let drips and drabs out about how he's either unfit, or no one thought, according to the New York Times, I think it was yesterday, no one really thought that Biden thought he could serve another 4 years. But that wasn't their tune for the past 3.5 years. So the media is also part of the problem here.
Brianna, where do Democrats go from here? I'm zooming out, the country as a whole. Where do they go from here? It's naive to think they're never going to come back. Every party convinces themselves of that as soon as they win the White House, but that's not the way it works. So they're going to regroup. They're going to come back. How, though? Further left? Younger? I don't see a great bench. Rear Admiral Buttigieg is not going to be able to win the Rust Belt swing states. Who's it going to be?
I think they're still figuring that out. You know, there are some people of the party, like people like Chris Murphy, who recently said after the election, it's time for us to kind of look inward and see what happened, why we're so out of touch with the American people. And yet I see people on the Democratic side in the past few days saying, we have to pass this dirty CR bill, right? No mention of, well, we can just do a standalone bill, or we can just have, standalone aid relief and then just have a continuing resolution clean, right? So if they're willing to do those things right now, I think it shows they're not willing to look internally, because if they looked internally, they would feel the pulse of the nation and see that Americans want to have things like a clean CR bill, standalone bills to help Americans and North Carolinians, not these puff pieces that they're trying to ram through right now. So this is the first indication that Democrats aren't serious about their promises to look inward and figure out what happened.
Brianna, let's talk about this Fani Willis thing. She's disqualified now from prosecuting Trump, but people are saying this is it for her. This is it for her. This is how these scumbags keep getting reelected. This is how Letitia James gets elected, Alvin Bragg. This is what you do. Adam Schiff, look, he got a vault from being in the House to the Senate because using your office to break the law, to do horrible things is how you get promoted in Democrat circles in blue cities and states.
Yeah, and it's a shame. Fani Willis had a Republican contender. I'm drawing a blank on her name, so I apologize for that. But people of Atlanta, they could have had a serious district attorney, someone who actually cared about the rising crime rates in Atlanta, and instead they reelected someone who used lawfare to target a political opponent. And Fani Willis's fall from grace is very reminiscent of that we've seen from people like Jack Smith, right, who's also dropped their case or had their case shot down by Eileen Cannon. And I think this is a good reminder of why Donald Trump is such an important figure. Because on July 13, when he stood up after nearly being assassinated and said, fight, 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 he didn't just mean fight for his life to not be assassinated, but he also meant fight the lawfare, fight all these tactics that are being used to take him down. And this is what fighting gets you, right? Fighting gets you Fani Willis being disqualified.
Yeah, no doubt about it. Brianna, thank you. Come back soon. I would thank you for coming to my YouTube channel, but I know how brilliant it is, and I know you love it here. So subscribe and watch. We're going to start really ramping things up and putting some funny stuff, some interesting stuff out there, some collaborations. Either way, my YouTube channel is officially the place to be. So stick around.